going to be yours when you get back actually has wings or not. Vehicle that's going to be yours when you get back actually has wings or not is of certainly no significance. And we don't care whether it does or doesn't either. And it's not a prerequisite that that happens. We do what we were relating to was we felt like back in biblical times that the vehicle that was seen and spoken of as angels' vehicle with wings, even though there were probably some vehicles that came at the same time that some came with wings, and they were thought to be angels also, and but that's another story. But we feel like the vehicles that were labeled angels back in those days were vehicles that were next level vehicles. In other words, they weren't, we feel like they were first next level vehicles, if you can understand that. They weren't human equivalents from another garden, and they weren't something that a human vehicle had changed into, that they were actually vehicles that belonged to the next level and had their beginning in the next level. They were first grade, next level vehicles. Now, when we use the term first grade, that doesn't mean that you're all entering the first grade. So don't associate those things. Now, but we do feel like that the vehicle that you're going to take when this task is over is a next level vehicle, and will be the first vehicle that you have had that was made in the next level. Okay? You got that? That didn't come from someplace else or from a human equivalent. And that we don't even feel like that vehicle actually is going through we don't know, but we don't feel like it's, when we picture it in our minds, we don't necessarily feel like that vehicle even, we don't know why, but we don't feel like that vehicle necessarily even went through a fetus condition and it grew to be grown. We feel like, believe it or not, that the vehicle is grown, fully grown in its size, but that it's like waiting for its mind. It's in a condition of vegetable, like we'll just use that as illustration. It's waiting for its mind. Now, if you've gotten that much straight, the most important point that we feel like we need to have you understand and thereby know how to work on is the condition that you want this next level mind to be in, that is going to be the generator of that vehicle, that is going to be the programming and actually the force, the energy, the generator. You know, back in biblical times as well, they used to speak of sex as knowledge. We've talked about this before. And we feel that anything that is a generated energy that can be spent is knowledge if it's spent, it's knowledge wasted. And anytime knowledge is wasted, now knowledge is not just information. Knowledge is applicable energy for change. Like if you have some information about how you should be changing, how you should be growing to perceive things differently and respond differently, but you can't apply the change, then that information is not what we're calling knowledge. What we call knowledge is the actual stuff, energy that can yield change. Change of ways, change of conduct, change of perception, that it's potential growth. And growth is change. Growth is not just information. Can you understand that? It doesn't do you any good to understand everything we've talked about if you have not the ability to apply it. That kind of information is worthless. It really isn't even knowledge. Because to us, the only kind of knowledge that counts is the energy that can be applied to growth. Now, that energy can be misspent and applied to growth in having babies, if you can take that illustration. The same energy that you can waste has the potential of creating new vehicles. Does it not? But when it is spent in that way, it can also create all kinds of things, negatives as well as positives. We're not saying that infants are necessarily positives. Do you follow that? They're not, because they're not necessarily positives. They're very negative, or the ingredients that could go to make an infant can be a very negative depending upon the level of the individual that's spending that energy in that way. If you're spending that energy in an outburst or in thoughts that are draining you, or in anything rather than increasing it. Now, we'll go to another aspect of this for a moment. A lot of times if we come in to talk to you and we feel good about the fact that we recognize that we are couriers of a frequency, we're bringing you some new information, some new energy, some new knowledge, some new thrust for your generator, that, believe it or not, when we deliver that frequency to you, if you receive it well, we may very well be, or what we brought to you may very well be the cause of your dealing with sensuality in the next day or two or three or week. And if you would recognize when your vehicle registers something that it has always related to as sensuality, just recognize that the mechanism of the human vehicle has been triggered, and you have an indication that you have some building up of knowledge in the vehicle, some building up of energy, some building up of mind. Now, the important thing is when you get that trigger, like a thought or a feeling that you could label a sensuous thought or a picture or something in your head, the important thing is, what are you going to do with it? Because if you're going to utilize it, you're going to say, oops, at this point I'm recognizing that I have been the recipient of the frequency of increased force, of increased energy, of increased applicable knowledge. And that we always put applicable on the front of that. Am I going to let that thought, or the fact that that energy triggered an image that I might relate to as sensuality, am I going to let it get me caught in the trap of trying to waste it? Because if I let that picture that it triggered that I might label sensuality, if I let our hostility, or whatever, we're using sensuality as one aspect, okay, one aspect. If I let that picture trigger another picture and another picture and another picture, I am going down the pipe toward heading for getting rid of it. But what I want to do is receive it. I want to be able to receive more of it and more of it and more of it. So I've got to convert it. Now, we've talked to you for years about this, and yet we can see even now that it has a stronger application to what you're going to have to put into that next level vehicle when you get back. We don't know if when this task is over and you enter the lab, if you might be taken right to where your vehicle is, and what is the force that is within you that you have built up into applicable knowledge and energy. We feel like it is going to be moved right into that vehicle. And the important thing is, what shape do you want that vehicle to be in? Do you want it to have strength? Do you want it to have applicable energy, applicable knowledge? Because if you do, you're going to be extremely protective of that force. Extremely protective of it. And you're going to convert it anytime that it wants to vent itself in any of the ways it can vent itself. It can vent itself by worry. It can vent itself by downers. It can vent itself in, you name the ways. All the ways, the human characteristics that you deal with that are unlike next level ways are ways that it can vent itself. If you let it, if you don't convert it, if you let that feeling linger, because the knowledge that you've just received that triggered that, go back to sensuality, the knowledge that, say, triggered a picture in your mind or feeling of sensuality, that very knowledge or what you have received that triggered that is the force also that can convert it, if properly applied. But it isn't going to convert it without effort on your part to say, look, just because I've got this picture in my mind doesn't mean that I'm going to invite another picture and another picture and another picture and go to the beastie and get rid of it. And start back, because anytime you let it vent, whether it's that worry that finds you weeping, and you have vented it in that painful weeping, or you have vented it in anger, or you have vented it in any other way, you've lost ground anytime you've vented it. And then there has to be that recovery. And that recovery, during the time of recovery, you can never regain. You can only pick up at that point of lost ground, and it doesn't mean that you can't regain that, but where you could have been had you not lost ground, you cannot regain, even though you can try to regain it by increasing your thrust more now than it has been before. Also, it's did you want to, before I go any further, go ahead.
As the older you get, the stronger the frequency becomes, which would make it more where you feel things more than what you have in the past. And therefore, the intensity of it increases so that you're working at it more than ever before. In other words, you don't want to think that I am getting worse when I wasn't this bad way back years ago. You see what I'm saying? what is happening, the frequency is stronger than it ever has been. And if you have done your homework or kept some control, then it isn't as bad now.
Well, you can
But
exercise that control
right,
if you practiced it.
Right. It doesn't mean that because even if you have exercise control and you're still having trouble, doesn't mean that you didn't do a good job.
No.
So you can't, all that is just looking at it for open a door to go on a downer. But just be aware that the frequency is stronger and it's going to build up.
That's right.
Even more, so you want to prepare yourself for when it does become stronger.
Everything that you get, all applicable next level ways and applicable change you get from this force. Do you follow that? You got to think of all the implications of that. You even get the ability to control the force from the force. And like T says, the further we go, because we want a strong. It's like these new vehicles require 220 current to operate. The ones you had before were good at 115. Do you know that? It's like these take double to operate. We're trying to build you up so that you can contain double, and it will go in, and that vehicle will function. It will function, and the knowledge that you take into it will be applicable. Now, in a sense, we're almost warning you in the right way. We're saying the further we go with you, if you lose control, it's going to be like a flame that you can't oust. You can't put it out. It's going to be like the worst impulse or temptation or whatever you want that you've ever had, and it's going to get worse and worse and worse. But it isn't going to get worse if each time your control gets stronger and stronger and stronger, and you're growing taller and taller and looking down on it because you know how to exert this new degree of control over this new flame that's bigger than the flame was before. Now, if you can really accept that and apply it, then the next time you get tempted with venting, you're going to be thankful for the opportunity to convert it. You're going to be thankful that you have even received a signal that has shown you that you have received a great deal of force here. And then comes the question, what am I going to do about it? Am I going to be like the human that wants to stay in ignorance? And that's where they keep themselves, by venting it. Every time they vent it in anger or sensuality or any of those things, worry, emotions, every time they vent it, the degree of change and improvement stays right there. You see what we're saying? It does. Their vehicles get older, therefore little ones come up and maybe call them grandmother. But they're not a bit different than they were at 18 years old if they have not exercised more restraint and control, because that's the law of growth and energy at any kingdom level. But the important thing is we want you to have good power to put into that vehicle and good controlled power. Realize that you have to tap this very energy that wants you to vent it, or that your vehicle makes you feel like you need to vent it, that from that very source is where you get change. From that very source is where you get range to control it. And you don't get it if you let it keep seeping out. A little here, a little there. Or maybe you don't let it seep out for a week and then you lose 50 gallons. Or 3 months you don't let it seep out and then you lose 100 gallons. Now, a couple things don't confuse here. Let's take a vehicle maybe that has a nocturnal emission or something, but did not want to have it. Went to sleep doing its homework of trying to convert and did not want to lose it, does not want in its unconscious or sleep condition to lose any fluid. I mean, honestly, wanted with all of its might not to lose it. In the same way that someone else would not want to lose any force in suffering or in emotions or in anger or anything else. And if the vehicle does vent some fluid, and you were applying not wanting it and meant it, nothing's lost. It was excess off the top. It was escape valve. Forget it. Don't feel, it's just nothing. But if you kind of wanted it to vent it because you were tired of fighting it, maybe you didn't consciously want it, but you unconsciously wanted to vent it because you were tired of fighting it, then you were not the beneficiary of growth. Because anytime it is vented, growth does not occur. Can you follow that? I thought you wanted to say something again. Go ahead.
I don't know if I'm throwing a kink in what Stowe's saying. I hope not. I hope I'm just adding to it. But you want to believe and you want to practice what Stowe has just got through saying to you. But you don't know what effect you have on your building up your mind force that goes into your new vehicle. You don't know how much restraint plays. Well, let's see how I can say this where it makes sense. You want to practice restraint in every way that you can, like Dawn mentioned, and not to lose any of that force. But if you do lose it, you don't want it to affect you so that you lose more by going on a downer or feeling badly about it. In other words, what you want to do is work hard to prevent any more leakage. Now, we don't know.
That's right. We're not setting you up for some point of saying if you lose it, that you've blown it. You know, that's ridiculous
That's not
too.
what we're saying.
No, we're trying to teach you the process of building it and building it and building it.
But what you don't know is how much, when you do have a leakage, you don't know how much you lost, how much actually went into your mind. Just like we said the other day, the effort that you exert is important. But even more important is restraint. But we don't want you to feel badly, so bad that you would cause more leakage. What you want to do is take a positive stand to say, I don't want that to ever happen again. I'm going to try my best to not have that happen again. Then if it should happen again, I am going to exert more effort to not allow that to happen. I want to make sure that I plug that hole up as well as I can. This is the kind of upward growth that you will have. And then you are really applying the force to build your vehicle in the most right way. And I'll say one thing more. But you cannot, and I'll underline cannot, you cannot expect a body to grow unless you exert the effort to make it grow. Just sitting in this class, applying nothing, will not grow a mind. We're sorry to say.
It's not going to generate the force to make a viable new vehicle.
In other words, Star Rhodey mentioned through osmosis something the other day. That's a bunch of malarkey. If you think through osmosis, you can transfer what you need into another body. I hope that doesn't.
Yeah, osmosis is when you receive information or something just by being around. But information like that is worthless. If we can't give you something, and then when the something we gave you is tested, is challenged, and then in that circumstance where it is challenged, you exercise the restraint, then, and that certainly can't be done by osmosis, it has to be done by effort. That's what T's talking about. That's where that effort is important. And the very thing that came in and challenged you is the very thing that can give you the strength to resist spinning it. If you can follow that, that's exactly the way it works. But the test is, what happens at the moment that I am tested? Now, many times before, or the moment I'm challenged to vent it, many times before you have simply blamed your genes at that moment. You have simply blamed the vehicle, or you have blamed the strain, right? Now, let's add on to that when you feel that moment of testing, that you recognize that what appears to be a testing, a venting, is a blessing. It's just a signal that you have received, and it has come into focus. You're getting a signal that it is coming into focus, that you have received enough energy here that if you don't go forward, it would like at this point to have an outlet. If you want tomorrow to have more energy than you had yesterday, then you have to not let it have a vent. And then tomorrow you will have increased. In other words, when each time that we give you a frequency, we give you this applicable knowledge, sometime shortly after that, it is going to have built in your system enough to come to a point that you will recognize being tested toward venting it. At that point is your option to stay where you were and not grow any, and have to wait for another shot, or to apply that frequency and that energy and force by not venting it. Can you follow that? Because if you vent it, you've got to wait till the next one. And you don't know how long that's going to take.
We have kind of been given instructions not to hold meetings as frequently as we were doing there, and I can see now why, because you were getting such a strong frequency that it was affecting just about everybody.
In all kinds of ways. I mean, severely.
It was...
Some of you were feeling like, I'm going backwards. What's happening? I had 6 months ago, a year ago, I had 10 times more control than I have now. And it's because you didn't know how to apply as fast as we were giving it to you the added control on it, and thereby be bigger tomorrow and bigger the next day and bigger the next day. You were getting maybe 2 or 3 doses, and then you had to let a little go in order to get another one. Do you follow what we're saying?
So in a sense, it isn't a put down to you, so don't feel put down, but just be aware that the next level is watching you very closely, and they know what your capacity is at this time. We tried moving it more quickly, and it didn't. It was
too fast for some of you.
Fast for it, some of you. Some of you could take it.
As far as we know, some of you were able to handle that pace.
Some of you were honest with it, totally honest with you. Some of you could take it.
Which brings up another point, if you're through with that. And that's back to what we said when we called and had you come to the speakerphone for a few moments. Just to clarify it a little bit more, we've told you before, and we'll tell you again, that you're of different ages. Probably no 2 of you are twins. None of you are exactly the same age, but you were all within a large span of experience and tasks. Within a large span, you were all ready for an opportunity to get this new vehicle. Okay? And in the process of getting it, since the Next Level designed it that way, you could do a tremendous favor down in Purgatory by working on the plants that are in an early stage of development and helping them at that time. And you have tremendous contribution to make to this level during this time of your making this change. But we feel like some of you had probably waited a long time. We don't know how long a long time is, but you waited a long time for this opportunity to come, for you to have this experience in order to get this new vehicle. Some of you may have just arrived at the point of the challenge of a new vehicle being offered to you, because it's a challenge, it's a task, it's a difficult task, and if the task does not succeed, then the old vehicle is the only thing that's still viable. Do you follow that? In other words, it still would have to be retaken. And but understanding that, don't be confused. Like when we said that some of you could take it better than others, that wasn't necessarily a put down to those who couldn't. It was our recognizing that some of the younger ones, or some of the ones who were having more difficulty with their vehicle, that appeared at that moment to be younger, we were moving too fast, and we had to assist them a little bit by backing off a little. But we don't want to back off any more than we have to. And but you're going to prove to us again, between now and the time this task is over, how fast we can move, by whether or not you can cap and thereby expand as energy is given to you and applicable knowledge is given to you. Part 30? Let me say one more thing. Don't forget what you're about to say. Don't forget? Promise? Okay. When you get into these new vehicles, you may or may not have any conscious remembrance of your experiences prior to this new vehicle. Now, you will have in your next level minds and in your computers the application of all of the lessons that you have learned to this point. But you may not have any memory of it. We're telling you that so that you won't necessarily be looking for it, and should it matter to you. You have enough memory of it to apply it, but you shouldn't care about reminiscences so that when you get into the new vehicle, you'll be concerned with, where was it in the next level that I learned this, or I learned that, or, I remember that experience with so-and-so, and in that experience we learned this lesson and that one. Do you really care? All of that got you here, got you in an out-of-body experience. Because that's where you are. You're in an out-of-body experience where you are hosting another vehicle. You are playing visitor in another vehicle, and while during the time of this transition, and then you're going to take this force with you, this mind with you, and we feel like that mind will move right into that vehicle, and that vehicle will have the consciousness that you will have at the completion of this task. Now, it will not have the struggles of the genes of the vehicle that you have with this vehicle that was used as the tool for generating the growth of that energy. Can you see that? Does everybody follow that? But you may not have the conscious knowledge of past experiences in the next level. But you will have the application ability of everything you have learned in the next level. It will be there. You'll just know it. It'll just be as it is with humans whose little identity lines come from one vehicle to the next, and they know certain things, and you wonder, well, where did you know that? Well, I don't know where I know. I just know that that's right. And it's because they've already learned it. And so they fall into it very quickly and easily. If they haven't learned it, they have to go through a period of learning it. So the same thing will be applicable in your case. Dr.
When you came regularly, and you gave force to all of us at one time, and it was frequent doses. Now that force would come to us and it would apply differently to each individual because of the package that they're in, correct?
Well, not necessarily just the package, but partially the package, but also on how desiring of receiving you were. Because I'll interrupt you just a second, then go on. Because like one meeting, I remember when we came in, everybody was so down, and a couple times. And I feel like you hadn't recovered from the previous meetings, and it was just weighing too heavy, and you didn't know what to do with it. And you didn't want to bend it this way or that way, but you just hadn't taken it in and grown up to accept it and be ready for the next. Now, go ahead.
Okay. When we receive a dose or a force from a meeting, like we are right now, a pretty good
right.
dose, that's bringing out in us just simply what we came here in these vehicles that present us with so that we can learn to fight against it. Am I making sense?
Well, it's not bringing it out. We're actually, it's like if you are receiving, if you're sitting there as thirsty as you know how to be, and you're listening very carefully, and you're receiving the frequency that's being delivered to you, then you are receiving energy. You're receiving what we will call applicable knowledge. You're receiving force.
And what does that stuff do to
that force as it goes in and takes house and begins to find home there? Then the vehicle begins to respond in some of the ways that it would to vent it.
Okay.
And it has to respond that way because it doesn't really become your force, and you're not really able to move up a step by just receiving it. You only move up a step by not venting it once it begins to test you.
It's just a natural occurrence.
That's right. That's right. But if you sit there half asleep and you're not really thirsty while we're so excited about giving you this knowledge, then not much is going to happen. Not much is going to happen. You just kind of coast along. So in a sense, when we ask you to be very, very thirsty and be very receptive, we also know that it's going to be followed by, opportunity. And we've always said this, that opportunities are going to come to test. And they don't, those opportunities of test aren't related to the subjects we're talking about. They have no relationship to the subjects we're talking about at all. They have relationship to the weak holes in the dikes of your vehicle. And because that's the tool that is building your generator. You know what I mean?
I want to check if I was thinking about some of the right things that you said when we received some energy and frequency, that one of the ways it can affect is for the vehicle to maybe have some problems physically, like think it's not feeling too well.
Could be some side issues of that.
And it might even be hard on the vehicle. Something was said in a few meetings ago. And I realized that I always was thinking that after it got assimilated and made like mine energy rather than just something I just received, but then the vehicle went through a stage where it actually felt really pretty good and didn't feel sick and felt like it had more energy. And I just wondered if...
Well, I tell you, we feel that the energy that we give to you isn't automatically hard on the vehicle. when we're giving you the energy and the frequency and this force, that you can unconsciously, really unconsciously, begin to get anxious about it. And you can let that anxiety be destructive to your vehicle, cause you problems emotionally or other things, because you're anxious about it. It's like you don't know what's coming and you can't anticipate what the test is. It's about around the corner, and you just and all these things, and that anxiety, because you know that force is there. It's almost like you knew in that unconscious condition that you were going to receive this new force, and the big question was, what am I going to do about it? And so you become worrying about it before the tests actually arrive. And that anxiety, and this is still subconscious, and that anxiety can still cause the vehicle problems. Now, there are certain problems that it can cause the vehicle of discomfort, but we don't feel that discomfort is really destructive to the vehicle. It can cause it aches and pains and minor discomforts, but it really isn't really destructive. This mind that we're trying to help build, this force that we're trying to help build, believe it or not, can almost operate a corpse. Now that's true. It can, if you have that mind and strong and in good control, your vehicle can almost be in a corpse condition, and it can get very good function out of it. And but part of your homework requires that you take care of that corpse to the very best of your ability, and that's not only with what you consume, but that's with attitude. Because almost a more important ingredient of how you take care of the vehicle is the attitude you have toward the vehicle. If you have a very destructive attitude toward it, then it's going to work more and more against you. All right.
I don't know if I get this out right. I felt like I was seeing something for the first time, that even as you sit and give us what we would call knowledge, like I was seeing in just words, but conveying a frequency which has no morality, no judgment, nothing attached to it. And then it's not even so much received as pulled in. It's like it's made available, but there's nothing that happens unless we suck it in.
That's right.
And then...
And even you have to convert it to knowledge.
Right, and then it's like once it's there, it still doesn't have... There's no anxiety, there's no judgment, nothing attached to it. Then the vehicle responds to that and starts interpreting what it feels. I'm not going to get this.
Yes, you are.
Okay, the mind, when it takes that frequency, it can take that frequency through desire and convert it into an energy that will grow our next level bodies. Grow
maybe not grow. We've used that term, but it's going to be the life force of that vehicle.
Right.
It's going to be the programming. It's going to be the ways of that vehicle, and they'll be easier to carry out with that vehicle. Well, you've got the worst conditions to carry it out with this vehicle, but you can't build a strong mind if it isn't developed under the conditions of this vehicle. Go ahead.
I know it's really difficult because it's like a huge balloon. Like if this, every time we receive this frequency, the only way it can go wrong is for the vehicle to interpret that. And so it gets translated as anxiety. It gets translated as emotional responses and anger, or through sensuality, or whatever it is. But if there were no translation, if there was just a drawing in and an acceptance of this frequency,
Right.
and then the effort put into wanting, you don't know how it happens, but wanting that to develop the right programming. I mean, it's hard for me to even think.
Well, if you absorb the frequency without translating it to mean such and such,
If you believe it exactly as we're saying it, you have no hesitation about it. You're accepting it just the way it's given to you, and you're accepting all of it that you can possibly accept.
Then you can only grow. I mean, you can.
Yes, but the
I mean,
test
only
is,
gain strength.
that's right, but
It
the
would
test
happen
is going to
over
be, once it gets in there, it's going to try to bend, because it's more than you had before.
Mm-hmm.
It's more than you had before. So once it takes home in your, becomes in your next level mind, it's going, since it's more. Accustomed to, because you've never had this much before, it's going to try to bend. In other words, each time we sit with you, we are giving you force. Now, we may be, at times, giving you force that is restoration of what you've spent. That's your problem. Do you see what we're saying? That's your problem. It shouldn't be restoration of what you spent. Because if you haven't spent, then each time you get the frequency and this force, you're getting bigger and bigger. Now, since it's more than you, let's say you didn't spend it, and we meet with you again, and let's say your last time you had worked up to 30 gallons, and you didn't spend any, because the last meeting you went from 28 to 30 gallons, and you didn't spend it. And so we come and give you 2 more gallons. And the vehicle's going to say, now, wait a minute, I've never had 32 grunt to get rid of it. And it's your effort against that programming that builds it. It's a real neat design. In fact, it's to your advantage that it tries to program you to bend it. It is to your advantage. Otherwise, you couldn't take it and increase your capacity to hold more and more. But each time that it says, I can't handle this much, I've got to get rid of some of it, then you go right back to the position that it was before that. Or you might vent over a 4-day period more than you've received the last couple of meetings, and you go a couple of degrees down, less than that. And then the next 2 or 3 meetings are just bringing you up a few steps where you were up here. This is the reason we feel like it's so significant to you, that when we are the deliverers of this to you, that you know that following it, you are going to have opportunities to lose the new degree of force you have received. And that at that time is the time to make the rubber of your balloon grow in elasticity. Because that's the only way it's going to grow. Now, you can't really receive it without the vehicle having some tests. Now, some of you will have some lesser degrees of tests because by your age of your next level mind, you have grown to be a little bit stronger than others. Now, this is no excuse for any of you, because but it just means that some of you can exert that effort because you've had a little bit more practice at it. Now, that also, we can turn that around the other way and say, if that weren't so, let's say that when you all started this class on the same day, that some dove right in and practiced restraint every time their vehicle wanted to vent itself so hard that maybe that there's a possibility that a younger mind could have grown at a faster pace than one who had been in the had not exerted that strong effort to not vent during this process. In other words, you've had a long time here in our eyes to build a pressure tank of a considerable amount of force. And we don't feel like we have ever given you more than you should be able to handle. But at times we have given you more than you did handle. And so we back off a little bit because we want you to get the strength enough to get control again. You know, you've got to get the reins again. If you're so convinced that you've lost the reins and you can't get your control back, then we're defeating our purpose. We're not helping you. We'd have to say to you, well, you're going over there, we'll take care of these that have their good tight reins. And that's not what we came to do. We came to have all of you prepare the mind that's necessary to have a viable new vehicle with strength and with the ways of the next level.
I want to tell you something, and I hope it won't discourage you. I hope it will make you more determined. But when this method was designed, it was to keep individuals out of a next level vehicle who were not capable of growing a vehicle, which you should appreciate the fact that it's this way, because only the ones who take on a next level vehicle can be fully trusted, like we said before.
Well, because they have it in their mind to exert those ways.
That's right. So it is not easy to grow a next level vehicle.
You're talking about growing the vehicle or growing the mind?
I'm using low lingo, but I mean transferring to a next level vehicle. In other words, if you think it's easy, you are mistaken. Because it takes every effort. And even now that you know this, know what you know now, it's going to take all the effort that you have from now on to make up for your goofing off in the past.
You know
what I'm saying? In other words, you can't take a next level task lightly. You can't think that you're fooling the next level by slipping off into a room by yourself or with someone else and goofing off there and thinking that it can be dismissed very lightly. Because it cannot. In other words, you have got to realize the seriousness of what you are doing. There may be some sitting here right now who have done this before and did not make it.
Who have tried for a vehicle.
In other words, it is not unusual. And it's probably very common for individuals to have to do it, to attempt it more than once. And the reason I'm telling you this isn't to discourage you, but we hope that you will put the effort in from now on, all of the effort that you can, and take this more seriously. And not think you can fool the next level because you can't. You're only fooling yourself if you think you can do it, if you think you can fool the next level.
I'm going to repeat that what we said earlier, that the times that this opportunity comes around are long and far between. And so don't say to yourself, well, I'll get another opportunity. You know, I can. So what if I fail this or give in to vehicle or let it bend and it doesn't grow too well. I heard T and Doe tell us that some have maybe tried it before, and I'll get my chance to try again. If you're made of anything that's next level stuff, you don't want to return to a vehicle as limited as the vehicle you had before. And you don't want to have to wait the time that it would take to have an opportunity to move into a vehicle that has a great deal of capacity that your previous one did not have. I mean, a great deal of capacity. A capacity that would be equivalent to what a caveman can do as compared to an astronaut. You know, that's about the separation there. And that's why it's so important. You know, this explains to me, this understanding we have right now explains to me why I used to never feel bad or sorry for those of you, as you expressed to us the difficult test that you have had with this or that or the other. I never felt sorry. Inside, something even in me even felt glad. But what I felt extreme sorrow for was when you vented because of that test. Instead of letting that test, exercising the restraint at the time of that test, and increasing the elasticity of your receptacle of next level waves. Each time you don't permit a vent, you become extremely more mature. You become more trustworthy in next level ways. And each time that something comes to you that tempts you to vent it. Anyway, I'm just repeating it. When it's really strong and seems almost impossible to conquer, is when you have a super chance of super growth. But when you lose it at that time, you have to wait for a charge to come again and see if you can apply that one. But your chances of getting back to where you would be had you not vented on the same timetable, your chances are all but gone. All but gone. Do you follow that? Because you've got to, you can't just say, well, I didn't do well here at all, but I've turned over a new leaf now, and boy, I'm going to go like Aspire from here. And then, if you couldn't go like Aspire there, what's to make you think you're going to go like Aspire here? You have to prove it. Those words don't mean anything to you. They don't mean anything to anybody else. It's what do you do in the circumstance when the challenge is there, when the restraint is being tested. Everybody?
I was just wondering, as a simple analogy to what it's like for my next level mind to enter my new vehicle and get everything going. In the past, we've given us lessons about after rest, when we get up and when we get the vehicles up in the morning, to get right up, be alert, be aware of procedures you need to follow, be keen, and just start your whole day off with a positive attitude, the whole thing. In other words, if you wake up and you let your vehicle kind you into being sluggish and slow, you don't put enough force into getting the vehicle moving in the morning, then you're not as serviceable in the craft or to the next level. Now, by this, an analogy, but on a much bigger scale, I guess, if our minds aren't strong enough to, when we get out of the vehicle, to get its eyes open and get its systems functioning right away, we won't really be able to take over those vehicles like we should, will we?
Well, you may not have the... I don't want to think this way, because we don't think in negative possibilities. That's not the way of the next level. We warn you that you want to exert enough effort so that your new vehicle is viable. And that's as far as we can go. We don't want to talk about what happened if you got there and you tried to charge it up and it was so sleeping because your effort was so sluggish that some member of the lab says, hey fella, I think you better go take that old vehicle you had because you're not going to make this one function. That's not going to happen. as far as I'm concerned, and as far as you're concerned, you ought to say that's not going to happen.
I didn't mean.
But saying it, what good does that do? It's what you do. The times you have really exercised restraint at periods of severe test, didn't you feel great afterward? Why don't you remember those times? Why don't you remember how good you felt when you converted that force? And you're not going to have any safeguard against the tests. There aren't any. The only safeguard you can have is knowing that the tests are coming. And knowing that each time new energy is given to you, that as soon as it begins to take hold in you, it's going to try to vent because you've never had that much charge in that vehicle before. And it's going to try to seep out. And that's all that the help you get is knowing that that's going to happen. But it's still always going to come as a surprise to you. And if you've gotten in the habit of letting, when it surprises you in certain ways, you've gotten in the habit of being a little permissive, then you're going to have to desperately change that habit. And I'm afraid at times some of your vehicles have gotten in, even during the time of this class period, have gotten in the habit of accepting certain permissiveness of venting because you just felt like, well, I'm trying to do my best on these scores and those scores and those, and this one I just can't look at because I'm just not succeeding too well on it. And subconsciously you almost can get into a habit of permissiveness in that area, but not even wanting to accept that it's a habit. But examine yourself and see if you have let little habits of permissiveness come in. Because if for every one that is, you've got a giant leak of your potential. You've got a giant hole in the dike. And that balloon isn't going to get bigger, it's going to get smaller if that leak isn't plugged.
There's something else that I told you something a moment ago that probably started you to thinking and could open doors to negativity, but I'll tell you something now that might make you look better, look in a more positive way. You don't know how much force you have in your vehicle. In other words, what we want you to do is think like we have asked you to think, to not allow anything to leak out. But if something does leak out, it's because you have tried restraint, right? And then if you lose something, you don't know how much force you had in this vehicle that you have to start out with that would cause you to have such a strong reaction to certain things. Can you understand what I'm saying? Well, in other words, let's say somebody who had a strong, sensuous drive, and
their vehicle?
A vehicle. And you take another person who did not have as strong of a drive. But equally, they may be this one vehicle with a strong drive, I can say this where let's say that a vehicle with a strong drive is a little bitty vehicle, and then a vehicle has using the size of the vehicle as the gauge, as the holder of this force. And then you take a long, tall, big vehicle with the same amount of force as the little bitty vehicle, but it has more space to fill up that vehicle. And therefore, he or she would let out less than the one with the little bitty vehicle. Now, that's not the way it is, but this is...
Well, that's a good comparison.
But the thing of it is, if the little bitty vehicle should fight restraint, and he or she filled up so with that force, and just let a little bit out, because it was about to burst the seams,
After applying the best they could
Right.
in restraint.
then no harm has been done.
That's right.
In other words, you don't know how far you have gone in restraint.
That's right.
But you want to think that I have not gone far enough. Do you see the difference? So you can't judge yourself.
And if it does leak a little bit, in spite of your best efforts, then you have no excuse for downer. This is, funny thing is, and sometimes we know this, most of the times we know this, when someone says that they slipped or they vented in this way, or we can usually tell if the effort was seriously applied. And sometimes the little vent doesn't mean anything to us because we know the effort was seriously applied. Now, you don't know, but you do know that your test is to apply the best effort that you have. And that if you are applying the best effort that you have, and like T said, a little leaks here and there, in spite of your best effort, then there's not that great a loss. But none of you, unfortunately, can be guaranteed of the measure of your vehicle. You can't say, well, I'm just a little vehicle and I've got such a great big mind that a little bit here and a little bit there doesn't matter much. Because, but you, on the other hand, you can't let this understanding create trapdoors for you. Can't create nooses for you. Like if you're trying the best that you can and you slip, then you can't just suddenly say, well, I guess I've proved myself how worthless I am. I've proved that I'm really not, that I can't control this, that I don't have any strength of effort. And that's worthless. The point is, know how the mechanism works. Know how when we give you force, we give you information, we give you energy, we are putting a power source in you. It's going to try to make you grow. But it's going to also be tested by the weaknesses of that vehicle. And your opportunity to let the mind grow is in controlling it to the best of your ability. And if you do that to the best of your capacity, you can't judge yourself. But you do know that what you're trying to have is more than adequate to have a full, functioning, healthy new vehicle. We feel like it's very important. Actually, it's going to, what we see in our heads is just like something that you're going to be taken into a lab when this class is over, and you're probably going to lie down here, and on this table over here will be your new vehicle, and and this new vehicle will sit up, and there you are, and you will be in that new vehicle.
You don't want just the finger of the hand.
No.
Or the big toe, or ears wiggle. That's it. We can guarantee you that if you do what we say, you will put life in that vehicle. And we can also guarantee that if you don't do what we say, you will not put life into that vehicle. It's as simple as that. We're not here spending our time with you as two humans trying to dream up things to make you all do. I know I could be doing a lot more things. I don't know what it is, and I'm sure I could find it. But the point I'm getting at is this is not a joke. This is not a little game. This is the real thing. And you're dealing with very intelligent people. And you're trying to enter a kingdom that is not very easy to enter into.
A vehicle level.
That's right. And as soon as you convince yourself that this is a tough thing, and that you want to vent all of those little holes in your balloon, the better off you will be and the more progress you will make.
I want to plug,
Plug 'em up.
not venom.
I don't know who you...
You want to plug?
Take that off.
You know, some of you, when you vent it a little bit after a great deal of effort, and you vent a little bit in spite of your efforts, some of you apply unnecessary downers on yourself, unnecessary discouragement. Some of you who vent a great deal more than is necessary don't take it seriously. Now, you may think you take it seriously, but you don't take it seriously, or you wouldn't be venting to that degree as frequently. And it's like your effort doesn't really mean anything. It doesn't really prove out. Can you follow that? And don't be hard on yourself when it isn't applicable, but also don't take it lightly when you can increase your intent, you can increase your overriding. You know, we don't care how bad those vehicles are as being able to hold this knowledge, but we do feel like that you have an override ability sufficient with any of the vehicles you're using to develop good, healthy minds for those vehicles, if you do what we say. Okay?
Thanks, Tony.
I got a little bit different picture tonight of what I thought was happening when we worked
I think the tape is on. I don't know. See if that's on. It might not be. Is it?
we have about 15 minutes.
Oh, okay.
That was
Thought I heard
squawking, the parakeet back there.
Oh, okay.
Is there right to think that there is what's happening as we deal with this? If I understand it right, part of what's happening is we're putting, at that time, we're actually sending programs or putting programs in the vehicle that's waiting for us up there.
To tell you the truth, we really don't think so. It's possible, but we really think that it's here, and that you're going to take this package right with you, and that's going to be the package that's going to be moved right into there. Not unlike the package of identity is moved even at the human kingdom level. But we don't think you're going to be taking an infant. That there's a difference there. Do you follow that? In other words, a human has a brief out-of-body experience, but he doesn't have a chance to learn anything during it. Do you follow what we're saying? He has, we're talking about the identity mind of the human vehicle. He leaves another vehicle, he's out of it, and then he has to go into another one, and he has to engage it. Now, you have, what you're doing is you have quite a spell outside, because you're changing a large strata. It's not as simple as the human vehicle that's going to another human vehicle that just has a little bit more capacity than the one he had before. You're now at a kingdom level that takes giant leaps, and therefore the period of preparation from one to the other has to offer a lot more lessons and opportunity, because there's such a difference between the vehicle you were in and the vehicle that you're going to. But we feel like that still what you have is right here. Now, that doesn't mean that it's all in your conscious mind, but it's still with you.
What we're saying then when we say, I don't want to put anything into my next level vehicle or mind that is not next level, is I don't want anything to go into my mind here, so that when I get up
That's
there,
right. That's right.
tie with the surface.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's right.
Somebody?
I wonder how much of a part the vehicle that we left plays in the transfer of mind to the new vehicle that we're making. Is the programming that we're trying to build in this vehicle going to be at hopefully a more refined state than was in the vehicle that we left?
say that last question again?
Approach we're trying to build in this vehicle going to be as refined or more refined, hopefully more refined state than was in the vehicle that was left behind.
Yes. Much more. You're learning things now that vehicle wouldn't even know how to handle. In other words, if you had to go back into that vehicle, it would be hard to even bring it into its consciousness and take advantage of this, because the function isn't there. It's like the chips aren't there to house it. Do you follow that?
When you
Huh?
when you
If he had to return to the vehicle that he had before coming on this task, that vehicle wouldn't be able to even house the things that he is supposed to be learning to apply to his new vehicle.
it's because of the frequency that you're receiving, and now it doesn't mean that you have not overcome and graduated from a garden.
No.
You know, I mean, that doesn't apply, but look at it in this way. Maybe this will answer your question better. When you move into your next level body, it is such a refined vehicle that the interpretations that you have of what you have learned in the past has a more refined, polished meaning or understanding. Do you understand that? In other words, you take a human who would listen to what we say on tape. Their interpretation of what we say would be entirely different than what you interpret it to be when you hear it.
Absolutely.
Right? Now, what we give you now and what you're putting into your mind, when you go into the next level vehicle, the facilities that you have in that vehicle will change the understanding to a much greater and higher interpretation. And the meaning will be like from daylight and dark. I mean, that's how much of a difference it would be.
It wouldn't even be fair if you could take all of this refinement back to that old vehicle, and that vehicle had space for it, and you would be like the king of the pack of the old vehicles because of your failure. You see what I'm saying? There's
no place
there's
in the
no
old vehicle.
fairness in that. It's not there. It wouldn't be able to go in.
My present consciousness, right here, that's it, greater than consciousness of my old vehicle?
Well, see, we can't answer that because you're evaluating that in such crazy ways. Because as you sit and judge what your consciousness is, but see, you're judging consciousness now by what you know of this world and what you've gone through in this class.
Right.
You don't even know how to judge your consciousness. You know, if T said something a moment ago, you would be utterly amazed if we went out and sought what we thought were the two brightest humans in that world and brought them into this class. And we sat them here and we talked to them the same as we're talking to you. And we even answered their questions. And answered their questions to what they thought was their satisfaction. And then you asked them to write down what they thought they had heard us say and what they understood. They wouldn't even be in the same world. Because and you don't know that. You don't know that. You think that it wouldn't take them long till they were hearing what you're hearing. You don't know. You sit here in a dreamland because if you tried to explain things you knew and even understood, which is the maturing of this mind we're talking about, things that you understood and could apply years ago while you were in this class. If you tried to find a single human out there that he would take the best he could do is listen to you and say, well, that's an interesting idea, but let me give you one. and then he'd give you one, but he would know nothing about it. All he could do is just hear the things that you're saying and say that that was an interesting theory. But you have gone step by step, applying everything. You have put into motion everything. You're miles from their even comprehending what you comprehend. But you sit here and say, duh, what do I comprehend? I don't comprehend anything. My consciousness is so little. And but the consciousness of what you have learned is of really not much use here. It's going to be of tremendous use in your new vehicle. The only way it's of use here is that as you apply things, you have more harmony in your craft. You have less trouble from your own vehicle. Those are about the things that you're more alert to things. That's about as simple or as complicated as it gets. But that knowledge put in your new vehicle is going to give you all kinds of functions that you had before. But you can't bring that into this brain, but it's still here. It's still here.
What you will, if you, let's talk negative for a minute, okay? Let's say you don't grow your next level body, and you go back to your old vehicle. You will just not have the remembrance of what you have learned, because it will not go into your vehicle.
Right.
Now, when you take your next level vehicle, which you're going to do now, then it will be like taking whole milk and making butter out of it. In other words, you're taking the cream and you're churning butter, which is the best product that comes from milk, supposedly, right? And that goodness from the badness is what goes into the mind. Can you understand that? You see what I'm saying?
You bet. Yeah.
In other words, it's the purity. It's the pure thought, the pure effort, the desire to do the right thing, the desire to be in control of the vehicle, everything that is above human is what you are filtering in to the mind of your that you are preparing to go into your next level vehicle.
You know, this what he was talking about, the milk and the butter and stuff. If you think that the programming that you're going to take from this mind and put in that new vehicle is about restraint and about that's not it. Restraint and those things are yielding what you're going to put into that new vehicle. You follow that? You're not taking the lessons of restraint and things. Those lessons, by exercising those lessons, you are accumulating what is going to house that vehicle. Now, as it manifests itself in that vehicle is going to do all kinds of things and have the generation of all kinds of abilities and ways that are the result that you got from restraint and control and all. But you're not going to wake up in that vehicle and say, I've learned restraint. I've learned control. I've learned how not to let a human vehicle get the best of me. You know?
This is what I was trying to say. It's the purity that you will absorb, and it will have no labels on it. But it will be in the most refined state, where the interpretation will be according to the interpretation of your new vehicle, which is according to the ways of the next level. Thank you. Okay. What,